Hello, this video is the history of Spain. Uh-oh, I gotta plug in my camera just a second. Spain is a country in Europe, and it's the country where Spanish comes from. That's why it's called Spanish. And they were the ones who colonized Latin South America, so that's why them in South America, they speak their Spanish. So I don't really know that much about the history of Spain, so it's not going to be that long of a video, but I figured I'd do it just because it's one of the big countries, one of the major countries, because it's one of the big languages, and also it was at one point the biggest power in Europe. So let's start at the beginning. A long time ago, I guess the Celts, they were there. I haven't really read about it that much. I think there's some megaliths there. It's right across the way from the Africa, so maybe they had always been kind of a little bit darker skinned. If you look at them now, they're all really darker skinned. I was in Spain in '97, and it's a really interesting place. Like really interesting place because they have the siesta. Like the place is totally empty and closed during the day for like an hour or something, or they go home and they shut down, and then they come back, and then at night they all out, like millions of people are out, and then even like all night long, like they're a really nocturnal society. And they even have these like special curtains in the hostels and stuff that you can close up and completely shut out the light. But and they do have a cool mix of like leftovers from the Muslims, like the whirling dervishes. What do they call it now? The dance, the flamingo, or they spin around the ladies with their dresses coming all out like that, and the music. And yeah, but they're all dark skinned. They look like Antonio Banderas. So it's kind of like why people in Latin America are dark skinned. They're also more related to the Indians down there, but oh, my ex-wife would be a descendant of the Spanish because she's Chilean. But anyways, yeah, I don't think they're as successful of a society though as the other countries in Europe because their product is Latin America, which are screwed up countries. Countries in Latin America should be first world. They have all those resources, no population problems. They got to reprogram the country themselves, so there should be solidarity. They never had all those wars to destroy their economy, yet they're fucked up. And I think that's Spain's fault. So there are problems with Spain, and I can say why. I know why that is. But let's talk about the history. Back a long time, yeah, the Celts. Then the Romans came in and took over Spain. Before they took over France, and Spain was very, very, very much part of the Roman Empire, all the way up until like the very end. And Greeks were setting settlements there in Spain, the Iberian Peninsula. So there was contact with the Greek world for a long time there. So they have an old culture, Mediterranean culture, an old culture of literacy with the letters and all that stuff. And also if you study the language of Spanish compared to Italian, the language of the Romans, Spanish and Italian are really similar, like even more similar than Spanish and Portuguese. I was in Brazil hanging out with this Italian couple, and they were speaking Italian to me, and I was speaking Spanish to them, and there was no problem in communicating. They're practically the same language, so there was lots of communication between Spain and Italia. So I think Spain was definitely tied right in to the Roman Empire and absorbed a lot of that. Another interesting thing about Spain when I was there is that it's just, I think it's a lot of the old world is just still alive in Spain. When I bike toured through there, and so I'd come up on a city And I'd look from the distance, and it would be the towns there suddenly start. It's like one of those towns you'd see like from Star Wars. You come up in the desert and boom, it's all there. Like they practically still have a wall around it. You know, in France and England's not really like that. You don't have like whitewashed like stone apartment buildings all like scrunched together. And when the edge of the town, that's the edge of the town. France and England and all those other countries in Europe, you have houses just like America that kind of go out and then the town ends, you know. So, yeah. And there's piles of rubble all over the place in Spain. So, yeah, maybe they're lazy or something. I don't know. But, yeah, anyways, when Rome fell, the Visigoths came down. The Visigoths were originally from, like, Baltic region? Modern day Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia. And then, like, they slowly migrated down south and then got pushed in across the Danube once, which is a river that borders, like, Austria or something. Goes right through Vienna, I think. One winter they crossed it because it frozen over because they were getting like their asses kicked by the Huns, and so they moved into the Roman Empire, and the Romans absorbed them, and they ended up kicking the Romans' asses because the Romans were like not treating them right, and so they sacked Rome in 410, and then they went down southern Italy, and then they continued on through Italy, and it was actually the Vandals who took over Rome and set up shop in Rome, set up their kingdom there, called the Lombards. Another Germanic tribe that came down south. But so the Visigoths kept going, and they went into Spain, and they settled in Spain. So that was like and started kingdoms down there. So it was like Latvians wandered down and settled in Spain. Back in those days, like 2,000 years ago, in the days of the Roman Empire, there were just lots of nomadic tribes. It was kind of like the Indians in America. They just move around, hunter-gatherer types. And so that's why the Roman Empire existed and made those walls and frontiers to just try to consolidate their country and keep those other nomadic dudes from wandering into your country and causing war. So yeah, Spain after the Roman Empire was kind of dissident, so Scandinavian. So maybe there was actually more of an infusion of Germanic, white skin, blonde-haired blood, and at least amongst the people who were in control, the rich people. And if you look at paintings of Spanish kings and stuff, they're white back in the 500 years ago and stuff. Like King Henry VIII of England's first wife, Catherine of Aragon, who was Spanish, was white, red hair, white girl. So, and but yeah, Spain had like a lot of Jews there, a lot of Romans, Visigoths, and it had, okay, so let's go forward because I don't really know that much about Spain, but there was the Viking invasions. I don't know if the Vikings made it terrorize Spain that much. They're kind of far south, but they did get their asses kicked by Charlemagne. And Charlemagne started this whole big empire back during in the 800s in the time of the Vikings to protect against the Vikings and consolidate Europe to try to make them, I guess, protect him against invading forces of the Vikings who were different culture, different religion, different, they weren't Christian, they were like Norse gods and stuff, Norse religion. And yeah, but then they had their own kingdoms after that for a long time. So let's fast forward up to like 1492. That was a big year in Spain because that's the year that there was this king and queen called Ferdinand and Isabella from Castile, which was a kingdom in Spain that was in the center of Spain. I think their town was in Madrid, and that's why Madrid is the capital of Spain now, because they took over all of Spain. Ferdinand and Isabella, they were the parents of Catherine of Aragon, right? But if they're from Castile, then how could have she have been from Aragon? I think they were the parents of Catherine of Aragon, who was the wife of Henry VIII. But there's some kind of disconnect there. But there, at that point, there were lots of different kingdoms in Spain. In the 1400s, you had Castile in the center, and then you had like Catalan in the east, and their central base was like Barcelona. Barcelona. When I was in Spain, I went to this disco with the kids from the hostel, and I was in the basement, and there was some like Spanish girl there. And I was like, yeah, I don't speak Spanish or whatever. And she's like, oh, but we don't speak Spanish here either. We speak Castellan different than Spanish. And I was like, oh, well, there you go. That's interesting. But, so I guess the Spanish hold on to their roots more. Kind of old world there, but, so yeah, so you had Castile in the middle, Catalan in the east, and then you had Galicia, in northwestern tip of the peninsula, which was their own independent, and then of course you had Andorra. That's even their own independent country now, and they're like Celts. They speak their own like Britannic, Celtic, freaking language, dude. That's not related to the Romance or Germanic at all. I don't know how they held out for so long up there in the mountains. Tiny little country. I didn't go there. I should have. Maybe I should go back. And then there was Aragon, Catherine of Aragon. And I think that was an independent country. That's like in the northern part of Spain, like around the border with France. So, yeah, so that's like 1, 2, 3, 4, like 4 different kingdoms within Spain, independent kingdoms. And they're all, of course, speaking their own little dialect of the Romance language. Ancient, crude Roman language. Latin, ancient Latin. So all those languages were their own different languages. So basically, just as different from each other as Italian of those days was from them. But then the language becomes Spanish because one of the dudes, well, the Castiles, they took over everybody else, and then everybody had to speak their language, and so that's how Spanish became Spanish. But yes, that's what happened. Ferdinand and Isabella from Castile, they. 1492 was a big year because that's the year that Christopher Columbus went to America, and it's also the year that they killed off all of the Moors, and also the year that they started the Inquisition. Oh yeah, I forgot to talk Moors. That was another kingdom. So you had the 4 kingdoms up there in the north and west, and those were like descendants of Visigoths, Whiteys. But then you had the other kingdom that was pretty much took over the entire southern half of Spain. From the year like 800, so maybe Charlemagne and those dudes were fighting against the Muslims, because yeah, from like the year 800 all the way up until 1492, they had the kingdom of 2 kingdoms down there that were basically, I guess you could call them vassal kingdoms to the greater Islamic empire, which was centered in Baghdad. The Islamic Empire was the empire that sprung up after Muhammad invented Islam, and they were like, yes, Islam, God, one God, yay, start a big country. And they were like the first world of the day. They did trade throughout the freaking Iran all the way to Spain. They had systems of like borrowing money, like if you can't pay, don't worry, you'll pay me next time I come back with the caravan, and they paid, and they were translating ancient Greek books into Arabic, and so that's where Arabic numerals come from, because they invented Arabic numerals, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we adopted that around that time, I guess, probably through Spain, like 800. But yeah, one of the kingdoms was in Syria, and then they left Syria. Maybe they got kicked out by another kingdom or something, so they migrated over to Spain, and they moved into Spain back in like 800. And I think these are the darker skinned people. And that's why Spanish are darker skinned, because of all those Muslims who came over. But they had the kingdom of Cordoba and the kingdom of Granada. They had Cordoba, which was like, I think the biggest. Maybe Granada was just like part of the kingdom of Cordoba. but it took over the whole southern half of Spain for like 600 years. They didn't write in Latin; they wrote in Arabic. They brought the whirling dervishes over, which turned into flamingo, spinning around. That was actually part of their religion, the Sufi religion, which is a branch of Islam. It's kind of like Islamic Hindu Islam. It's actually what my parents were when I was born. My middle name was Krishnaya, little Krishna, until I was 3, and they changed it because they thought it was too hippie. But Cordoba was part of the Islamic Empire, the first world of Europe, or the first world of the world, most advanced. And so Cordoba was more advanced than everywhere in Europe. So like people would come down to Cordoba from other parts of Spain and from France and stuff, like Charlemagne and those guys, and they'd just be blown away by how advanced Cordoba was. Cordoba had street lighting. And this was in the dark ages of Europe. So Europe, those dudes were living in like thatch huts, rat-infested dirt floors, didn't shower ever, beards, eating your food with your hands. And then they go down to Cordoba and they've got paved streets, swept streets, street lights with like torches, I guess, and books everywhere, and all of the ancient Greek texts. And they're doing lots of cool scientific stuff back in Baghdad, and since it was part of the same empire, they were communicating with them in their language. Baghdad, I mean, they redid the. Since this is the history of Spain, I'll talk a little bit about the Islamic Empire, but not too much. But Baghdad was they had some dude reread one of the ancient Greek philosophers who did a certain experiment with shadows, sticks and shadows in the earth, found out the size of the earth, and then they did it again in Islamic, and they found out the size of the earth, and they got it to within like 400 miles of diameter. And so they knew the earth was round and stuff, and invented like all kinds of cool stuff, water fountains, and scientific. They had a big time scientific revolution. Could have turned into the Industrial Revolution, but then they got their asses kicked by the Crusades came down there and screwed them up some, and then the Mongols came down and killed them. But they're doing lots of scientific stuff. Like I guess I need to brush up on my Islamic Empire history. But they were doing I think like telescopes. There's a dude who made a telescope, and anyways. So Cordoba was really advanced, and the Europeans would go down there and they'd be like, wow. And then they'd see their mosques, which had really fine, intricate mosaics in there with the patterns, and like I went to Granada. Granada was a capital city of that area, and they had a big castle up on the top of a hill, and with all of the mosaics that they're still there, and it was the light of the world. But they were a different religion than Christianity, and like so, back then, back in like the 1400s, those people, Catherine of Aragon, not Catherine of Aragon, Ferdinand and Isabella, they were really ambitious, king and queen. Isabella was really religious, and wanted to spread Christianity, and didn't like the Muslims for some reason. I don't know why they didn't like them if they were so advanced. Maybe they got jealous or something, or maybe they just had wars. They did fight some wars against Muslims in those days. At one point, one of those English kings, I don't remember who it was, but he needed help he wanted to ally with them, with Cordoba, dude, the Caliph, to fight against like a civil war, or like the French or something. And he's like, yeah, you send me help and I'll convert to Islam. And the dude was like, yeah, whatever, get lost. So but they had a war all the way up in France, so they came in. Anyways, Catherine and Aragon and Ferdinand, they were bad people. I think they were bad people, even though they unified from Spain. But what they did is they borrowed money from all of the Jews in Spain, and they used that money to wage wars on the other kingdoms, on Galicia and Catalan and Aragon and Cordoba. And so they defeated the Moors. That's what they were called, the Moors, the Islamics there, and kicked them out of Spain. And then they started the Spanish Inquisition in 1492, which said that anybody who isn't Catholic, has to leave Spain or has to convert. And they burnt a whole bunch of people at the stake. The Spanish Inquisition officially, it was this like official doctrine, this official policy. And it was in effect from 1492, I think that's when they started it, all the way up until like 1847. So for like 350 years or something like that. Spanish Inquisition. It was illegal to be anything other than Spanish. It's Catholic all the way until 1850 in freaking Spain, dude. So they're kind of backward. But yeah, so they kicked out all those other dudes, and then they extended the Spanish Inquisition to the Jews that they borrowed the money from, who was paid for their conquests, and of course, yeah, didn't pay them back at all, and kicked them out. So the Jews all had to move up to. They were called Sephardic Jews. And they had to move up. They had this exodus and moved up to Ireland and Scotland. And actually, my uncle said he's Christian, but he became like a born again Jew like a few years ago. Lived in Jerusalem for 10 years ago. And went to some like Jewish thing and saw some lady historian who was like told him that the Kyles from Scotland originally came from Ireland, but they originally came from Spain, and before that they were associated with the Levite tribe. They're called the Kyle Levites. Jewish tribe in Israel. So anyways, yeah, so they kicked the Jews out and they moved away and consolidated the country. And Isabella wanted to they wanted to start a whole like empire, and so Isabel started wanted to spread Christianity, so they got Columbus. He was shopping around. He was from Italy, Genova, Italy, and he couldn't get any Italians to pay his way. But he got them, and so she paid for him so that he would spread Christianity and also find trading routes so that they could get rich to find India. Because he thought the world was round as well, and so he didn't think that you'd like just go off there and go forever in the sea and then die. So he went out there, off in the sea, and they were out there forever, and the people were like about to mutiny. They were like, fuck this, we're all gonna die, we have to turn around, because if we turn around now, we'll have enough food to get back, but if we go a few more days, we're not gonna have enough food to get back, and we're gonna be dead. So he's like, alright, we'll go 3 more days, and if we don't see land in 3 more days, you can kill me, you can chop my head off, and then you can do whatever you want and go back. It's like, alright, so they went 3 more days, and then on the 3rd day they saw land. And they went into, I think it was Dominican Republic Island. Found the Indians there, and the Indians were like really peaceful hippies, and were like really nice to them and helped them, and there was lots of gold there, just like everywhere. And they said, he wrote in his journal like, oh my God, we could subjugate this entire island just with us in our boat right now if we wanted to. And I think they ended up doing that. They like took over the island, killed all the Indians. And in fact, a lot of those islands, there's no Indians left at all. They completely exterminated them. There's one island, I think it's Guadalupe, that still has an Indian reservation. But those were called the Carib Indians there in those islands, but from the Caribbean. But and he had this deal where he could get to be the vice viceroy, like I guess the governor of that entire area, and claim it as him. And he called them the Indians because he thought he was in one of the islands off India. and they brought a bunch of gold back, and then I think he went 4 times. He went down there another time, and he was there like being the governor of his little island and stuff. But Columbus was a major asshole. He would flog his own. He would kill Indians and flog his own people, and and so they were basically rebelled against him and got him deposed and complained about him to the king and stuff. And so they put somebody else in charge, and to his objection, he claimed it was illegal because they said he got to be governor and make half of the money, which was a really good deal. He totally blew it. It was like the best deal anybody had ever gotten. He would have been really rich. But then he wanted to do one more voyage to try to find India, because by then they had realized that it wasn't India. But he thought that all he had to do was, because I guess they had people who walked across the isthmus of Panama and saw the other side. So he's like, oh yeah, all we have to do is get across Isthmus of Panama. And I think some of them, and maybe even it was him, they actually sailed up one of those rivers into the lake Nicaragua and sailed around there to look for another inlet. And but yes, he went down there in like 1506 or something or whatever, and he was hanging out like looking for, isthmuses, and his boat started sinking because it was getting eaten by all of the algae and stuff that was down there in the equatorial area. Different conditions in Spain, so they had to escape and went up north to some island, and their boat sank and they barely made it to some island. I think it was Cuba. And then his main dudes were in like the main central part where all the boats was in like Jamaica or something like that. It was 80 miles away, and they had a dinghy. And so the other dudes basically deposed him by then. He was only still a leader in that because he was a really good navigator, but he was just an asshole. He didn't know how to deal with people. So they didn't need him anymore, so they just left him on the island with some other people, I guess his friends. And they rowed a boat 80 miles to the main area, and they didn't come back for 8 months. They finally came back. And when they came back, they didn't even let him get on the boat. They just rescued his friends and left him there. And then they were like, all right, whatever, we'll rescue you, Columbus, and then we'll send you back to Spain. But he had to pay for his own voyage out of his own pocket back to Spain. And then lived another few years in Spain, pissed off trying to get his inheritance back or whatever. But yeah, he was a dick. Oh yeah, but when he was there on that island for 8 months, he was also being a dick to the Indians, and they wanted to kill him. And so, in order to save himself, he predicted an eclipse, which he knew that was going to happen, and he said it was because he was like a magical son of God or something. So they saw the eclipse and they're like, oh my God, he's got magical powers. So that saved his ass. Yeah, and then Spain. By then they were sending even more ships down, just collecting boatloads of gold from them. And then they went in with this dude named what was his name, Coronado, and I think he was only like 27 years old or something, or he was really young. Well, I guess they were all really young, but he went over there, and they met up with some Indian lady, some Mexican lady from the Aztec Empire, who had been like the servant of a Spanish explorer before that in some settlement, so she could speak Spanish. So she was the translator, and she helped them organize for the Spaniards to unite with some of the other Indian tribes there who were disenfranchised with the Aztecs, because the Aztecs had been growing their empire and subjugating the people around them. I guess this is the history of Mexico, but since these are all Spaniards, I'll include it. They went in and waged war against the Aztecs, and actually defeated the Aztecs because they had superior weapons and horses and guns and stuff. And and they killed the last king, Montezuma. Threw him down the stairs and took over freaking Mexico with a boatload of Spaniards, and so. But I think a lot of people were they must have had support from a lot of Indians, and one of the reasons is they had the Indians there, the Aztecs had this ancient legend that there was Viracocha. I think that's his name. Is that the name of the god from the Incas? I think that was the name of their god from the Aztecs. Viracocha was their god, and he was supposed to be a white man and they were descendants of the people who came from the east. I think it was the Atlanteans when Atlantis fell 10,000 years ago. They came from the boats from Atlantis in the Caribbean, the island that sunk, and into Spain or into Mexico, and maybe they were white people. But anyways, I think or maybe there were some explorers from even in the past that they'd forgotten about, like Vikings or something, but that it was a white dude with beard, and they were I think their soothsayers were like predicting that it was going to happen that year, and then they had it. And they saw him, and so they thought he was a god when they arrived, and so they bowed down and they united with him and they thought they were like saviors against the evil Aztecs. So yeah, they had some help with Indians, took over the Aztecs, Mexico. Tenochtitlan, the capital of Aztec, is modern-day Mexico City, and it was these islands in this huge lake that was like 100 miles wide or something, like 60 miles wide or something, huge-ass lake, which they drained, and then also some of the buildings are like sideways that you can see in Mexico now, because they sank and went sideways. But, yeah, so they took over there, and then they had another dude named Pizarro who went over to South America, and he took over the Incan Empire, just with he and his boatload of dudes, with their superior firepower. And I mean, they were good. They were some badasses, dude. Anyways, then they subjugated everybody and collected all the gold. There's lots of gold and silver. They had the biggest silver mine in all of America. And it was almost the capital of all of south of Latin America, was modern day Potosi, which is like 13,500 feet high, the highest city in the world. And they still mine silver out of that mountain. But and they had slaves there, like processing the silver that would work until they died. And then I guess they said there's no black people up there anymore because they weren't as good at the cold. But yeah, they were importing slaves over in the slave trade, just with like the English, and then I think they did the slave trade longer than the English, and then and just bringing all the gold back. Like they burnt books, they burnt all the Aztec books. They had books, written language. The Aztecs did, codices, but they also had stone books too that they took underground. So they still have some information, but yeah, and melted down all their trinkets, and I think there was a lot of gold there, and just turned it into gold bars and brought it back to Spain. So Spain became the richest country in Europe there for the 1500s. And they united with England because back in 1520 or something, the daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella, I think Catherine of Aragon, maybe they called her Catherine of Aragon because she was like, they gave her the title like Princess of Aragon so she could collect the taxes from it or something, but she was still a child. But she married Henry VIII II, the eighth, Henry VIII II, Henry VIII, and but she gave him a baby that died. Then she gave him a daughter, and then and then he fell in love with another girl, Anne Boleyn. So he was like, I'm gonna divorce you, and so he divorced her, which pissed off all the Catholics, and the Spaniards were big-time Catholics by then, because they were the ones, they were doing the Inquisition at that time, so that pissed off the Catholics. They didn't like Spanish anymore. But then, after King Henry VIII died, his son was in power, but then he died, so then the power went to the daughter of Catherine of Aragon, who was a Catholic, and so she wanted to unite with Spain again, and she married the King of Spain, who by this time, I guess, was the son, maybe? a grandson or something of Ferdinand and Isabella. And but then she died of uterine cancer. So, and then the power went to Isabel or Elizabeth, who is Protestant. So they became not friends anymore. And then Elizabeth started helping out um, the Spanish Netherlands. Spain owned lots of area of the Netherlands because one of the kings of the Netherlands, I guess through marriage, he was united with Spain. Because those royal families, king of this country and king of the other country, married each other a lot to try to, keep consolidating and unity and stuff to protect against the other dudes they didn't like. It was kind of like that game, that reality show, The Survivor, where you're always getting the alliances to go against the other. Yeah. So, anyways, one dude ceded his in his will. He gave it to the king of Spain. So then Netherlands was now part of Spain, and so they're getting their tax money off the Netherlands and stuff. But then the Netherlands Dutch people didn't want to be subjugated to them anymore, so they were starting to fight back. And also, it was called the Wars of Religion because they didn't want to be Catholic either. This is the beginning of Protestantism, the Lutherans and the Huguenots and all these dudes. So Elizabeth was helping them fight, sending them money and troops even to fight the Spaniards. So that pissed them off. And then she was officially Protestant. So then the dude was and then the dude was really rich. The king of Spain made the Spanish Armada. I don't know how many ships it had, maybe like 600 ships or something. Really big ships to sail through the calm Pacific and the Mediterranean Sea. And they had a battle against the Ottomans, kicked their asses, and so there's even a scene in the movie Elizabeth, the Golden Age, where they're cutting down all the forests to make the Armada. And he's like, I am sacrificing the forest to make the Armada. It's actually a photo. I did a screen capture of it that's on Flickr if you want to see it. But he was like, well, let's take over England. We can invade England and take England. See, that's why countries did alliances, because they were afraid that might happen. And yeah, it did happen. He tried to invade England with all the ships, but they went up north and the water was really choppy and not as fast, and the English boats were fought them off real good. Zoomed around them and did the fire ships into them, and then it was really windy and so they gave up and they couldn't land, and they were pushed north all the way up, and they wanted to get back to Spain. They had to go all the way up over the northern tip of Scotland and then back around and down, and they didn't even make it. Once they got to the western side of Scotland, they got pushed back into Scotland and beached their ships, 20 ships beached their ships on the rocks and got out, and then starved to death and got killed by the locals, and he lost his entire armada. And after that, Spain wasn't, this is in 1580 or something, I don't know exactly when, but Spain wasn't the big top-notch doggy dog anymore. And the Spanish the Spanish system of see, this is where Spain started to go downhill, because the Spanish system of money was, they were just taking gold and then blowing their gold on making ships that they sunk, and just blowing gold and sending settlers to the South America to just mine gold, and they set up the encomienda system, which was this totally racist, classist system where if you're born in Europe, you were top dog and you got to be the landowner boss. And then the mestizos, people who were and then white Europeans who were born in the Americas were second place. So they could never be as high as the people who were born in Europe. But they were second place because they were white. And then the mestizos were below that, the people who were half white, half native. And then the full natives were basically slaves. And it was like a policy. And so it was state-sanctioned racism and classism. And that's why it's like that in South America today, and that's why those countries are so fucked up. Because people are just hate each other. All the classes hate each other and don't trust each other, and so they waste all this money not trusting each other. Like if you go to Chile and you want to buy something, you can't just pick something up and buy it because people would just steal it. And you can't leave your things anywhere because people will just steal it, pickpocket you, and I mean they're just really criminally minded. I don't want to get into that though, but I was there for a long time. If you want to buy something in a store, you have to yeah, I'd like that. Get it for me, okay? And then they get it, and then you have to stand in another line to pay for it, and then you have to stand in a third line to show them the receipt so they can release it to you. And so, yeah, it's just expensive way. Too many glass ceilings, and it's just you can't have a strong economy that way. Spending all the money on security and regulation and all that, and then stifling having no meritocracy because opportunity is only for rich people who don't really work anyways. Yeah, so that was kind of and in America it was different because the English people, they would just go to America by themselves on their own money and then start their own colony, and they all had say in how they were going to live their life and didn't really answer to anybody, so they all cooperated and worked for themselves, and it's a better system. But the Latin Americans, they mixed in with the natives more, because they went down there basically as an enterprise to make money for Spain. But in America, they went, English and Germans went to America to start colonies, so they were like separate from the Indians and didn't mix in with the Indians. Just killed them, which is actually good for the economy because then there were no racial problems because there was another. But I don't want to get into that. I guess that'll be the history of America. So anyways, that was in like 1580 or something. And so yeah, Spain went down, and then all of the 1600s, Spain, I don't even remember what happened with Spain. There's some more uniting going on. The country of Portugal became independent after that. And Portugal had their own empire, and the Pope actually demarcated. They're having disagreements with Spain, and the Pope said, okay, Portugal gets something like east of the 40th parallel or something, and Spain gets everything to the west, and so that's why Brazil speaks Portuguese, because Portugal got Brazil, and then everybody else went to Spain. And the Pope actually tried to stop the Inquisition when it first happened. He didn't like how they were kicking out all the Jews and killing the Moors and taking over the other countries, and so he actually had a war because they had the Papal States at that time. He had his own country. They had a naval battle with the Pope, Ferdinand and Isabella, off the coast of Rome, which Ferdinand and Isabella won. But anyways, yeah, but they were having the Spanish Inquisition all the way up through, all the way through the 1500s, 1600s, the 1700s, and halfway through the 1800s. So it was an oppressive place. And it created a breeding ground for lying as well. Like if you're a sympathizer for another religion, you just don't say that you are, and then you get used to lying, and then I think Spanish, because Latin Americans lie a lot. And I think they learned that from the Spanish. Because when a lot of Spanish who came over, like the dude who started Chile, made all these promises to his settlers and then didn't keep any of them. And it's also kind of not, sneaky. I guess they're sneaky. I went to Spain, and I had some weird experiences there. I bought a CD player. And then I walked out, and he gave me the price, and I walked out, and the dude overcharged me by like $30 or something. So I went back, and I was like, "What? Look!" And he's like, "But I think he did that because I was American, didn't speak Spanish." And I was hanging out for like an hour. Like he was like, "Oh yeah," and he's trying to ignore me, and he saw I was there, and he's like, "Here, some batteries." Gave me like 4 AA's. I was like, "All right, whatever," and I left. And this other dude was like yelling at me, trying to buy like a piece of like bread because he said I was like not getting my money out fast enough or something. I don't know. Anyways, I'm not saying I don't like Spain. I think it's an interesting place, but I think that Inquisition stuff caused problems. Anyways, so then you go into the Industrial Revolution, and let's go to the beginning of 1800 because Napoleon went into Spain. Napoleon was taking over all of Europe because he wanted to make Europe like France, get rid of all the monarchies, because France was about to get invaded anyways from all those other countries because they didn't like how they killed the king and queen, and they didn't want to have like a democracy or a republic because they thought that it would cause their own people to rebel. So then Napoleon was able to get huge army of people together to fight for the cause. And they didn't like England. Napoleon didn't like England because France and England had always been at odds with each other, competing for their colonies and stuff. And so Napoleon wanted to set up this thing where it was all of the Europeans against England, where nobody does trade with England. And so all the other European countries were like, okay. And by then I think he had set up vassal kingdoms, and he'd taken over like Austria and Germany and Italy and stuff. Or not yet Italy. But Portugal didn't want to go along with that. So he got pissed off at Portugal, and he was going to take over Portugal. And so he said to the Spanish, he said, yeah, is it okay if I travel through Spain in order to take over Portugal, because those bastards don't want to go along with my let's boycott England thing. And the Spanish were like, okay, cool. So Napoleon marched through to take over Portugal, and he also took over Spain. He lied. He used the trust of the Spaniards to march into Madrid and then just fight Madrid. But the Spaniards were pissed off about that. I thought that was unfair. So there was guerrilla warfare. And then Napoleon took over Italy, and then marched into Russia. Ended up getting his ass kicked. He was spreading his forces too thin, having occupational forces all over the place, and all of the. He installed his brother, I think, as king of Spain. They deposed the king, installed the brother, and also another brother, Joseph, as king of Italy. And they took over. Yeah, but the guerrilla fighters were fighting against Napoleon for like a couple of years until they beat Napoleon and kicked him out of Spain. Spain got to be a country again. Then they went through the 1800s. And then the Spanish had a war with America, the Spanish-American War in 1900. And America won, so America took Cuba from Spain. And Spain also had a colony in the Philippines. They owned the Philippines. I think a lot of old people still speak Spanish there, but they had a war. America had a war with Spain and kicked them out of Philippines too. And then in 1807, I think, at the end of it's probably related to the Napoleonic Wars. That's when all the countries in South America rebelled, led by a Colombian named Simon Bolivar. Colombian was the first to go free, and then the other ones, like by 1815, all the countries in Latin America were independent of Spain. So they'd been in power of Spain, Latin America, for like 300 years. So they had an iron grip on Latin America. That Encomia system worked great for Spain, because England didn't have power in America for that long. England showed up like 100 years after Spain in America, and then they lost it, like 20 years before. So then zoom through the 1800s, and then oh my god, I'm about to run out of time. And then then there was the Spanish Civil War, and from 36 to 39, that was when they got pissed off at the royalty, and they wanted to take over the royalty and become fascists. So Franco took over, and that was a really bloody bad war, where it was like cousins fighting against cousins and stuff, and brutal nastiness. And but then they got invaded and did World War II. Then after that, I think they went back to being a kingdom. And I guess I'll make the Spanish-American War. That's part of my video about fascism and Nazism and communism. So I'll do that in another video. And then they had some more problems, but I think they're finally starting to come up and be first world again. They were the 11th most developed country in the nation as of '97. So that's like above America and Germany. So they're doing pretty good. Anyways, I'm out of time.